Every country on Earth is in debt, without exception. The United States is more indebted than at any point in its history. Japan follows close behind. Europe, China, emerging markets, every major economy carries obligations measured not in millions, not in billions, but in trillions. Even nations rich in oil, resources or exports are deeply indebted. So we need to pause and ask a very simple question. If everyone owes money, who is the creditor? Because debt always has two sides, a borrower and a lender, a promise and a recipient. But when we zoom out and look at the global system as a whole, the lender seems to disappear. And that is where the real story begins. This is Economic Historian, where money, power and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Most people think of debt as a failure, a burden, a sign of weakness. For governments, debt is something else entirely. Debt is not a mistake. It is the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every economic boom and collapse sits on top of this invisible structure of promises and obligations. And if you follow those promises far enough, something deeply unsettling becomes clear. The world does not owe money to any single country or institution. It owes it to itself. But that does not mean the system is fair, or balanced, or harmless. Today, total global debt exceeds $300 trillion. That is nearly 3 times the size of the entire world economy. How did we get here? The answer is not found in stock exchanges or modern banking halls. It begins on the battlefield. Long before credit cards, before digital transfers, before central banks as we know them today, the concept of national debt was born in war. In the late 17th century, England was fighting France. The war was expensive, gold was running out, taxes were not enough, so the crown made a revolutionary decision. Instead of conquering land to extract wealth, the king borrowed money from merchants. In exchange, he offered something unprecedented. A permanent stream of interest payments backed by future taxes. To manage this new arrangement, a new institution was created, the Bank of England. This was a turning point in history. For the first time, the state could spend money it did not yet have. And lenders received something far more valuable than gold. They received a government promise. That promise could be traded, bought, sold, passed from hand to hand. This was the birth of the government bond. The seed from which the modern financial system grew. Other nations quickly followed. France copied the model. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to finance its revolution, and later its westward expansion. National debt stopped being a sign of failure. It became a measure of credibility. To borrow was to rule. Empires once conquered territory to extract gold. Now they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield moved from land to balance sheets. Fast forward 3 centuries. Debt has become the world's most important export. The United States owes tens of trillions of dollars. Japan's debt exceeds twice its economic output. And global borrowing increases by the equivalent of $1 trillion every few months. Every country owes, every bank lends, every citizen, through taxes, pensions and savings, is both a debtor and a creditor. So where does the money actually go? Let's start with the United States, because its debt is not just national, it is global. Of America's total debt, roughly half is held by public investors. Not foreign governments, but domestic institutions. Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, and the Federal Reserve itself. Foreign holders account for only a fraction. Japan holds the largest share. China follows. Then the UK and Europe. So when people say the US is in debt to China, the statement is technically true, but deeply misleading. Most of America's debt is owed to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Financial institutions buy them. The central bank often buys them back by creating new money. Taxes fund interest payments. Those payments flow into retirement accounts and investment portfolios. The debt is real, but the creditor is largely a reflection of the same system. This circular structure is not unique to the United States. Japan lends to America. America lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing nations through institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Developing nations, in turn, park their foreign reserves in Western government bonds. Every country holds someone else's promise. It is a global chain of obligations, a planetary game of financial hot potato, except the potato is made of trust. As long as no one drops it, the game continues. But there is another layer, a more powerful one: the markets. Behind every government bond stands a vast web of institutions managing tens of trillions of dollars. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay for survival. When confidence fades, currencies collapse, interest rates spike, governments fall, democracy chooses leaders, markets decide which nations endure. At the centre of this system stands the modern high priest, the central bank. Central banks do not simply manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time a central bank purchases government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every dollar, every euro, every digital unit represents a claim, a promise somewhere else. For decades, this loop has sustained itself through confidence. Investors do not expect governments to repay their debt in full. They expect interest and renewal. This is the critical truth. In the modern world, government debt is not designed to be paid off. It is designed to be rolled over. When individuals take loans, they repay the principal. Governments do not operate that way. They refinance old debts with new debt, again and again. Interest becomes the product, stability becomes the rent. The global economy depends on this process continuing, like a machine that must keep moving to survive. We have seen what happens when confidence breaks. In Greece, debt became unpayable. Bond markets panicked, yields exploded. Rescue came, but at a price: austerity, unemployment, a lost generation. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national trauma. In Sri Lanka, economic collapse followed the loss of foreign credit. When the system fractures, creditors suddenly become visible, and the cost is always paid by the public. And this leads to the final, uncomfortable truth. Debt is not just a transfer between nations, it is a transfer between classes. Interest flows upward, from workers and taxpayers to institutions and investors. Those who own debt are rewarded. Those who service it are burdened. That is why global debt and global inequality rise together. So when we ask, if everyone is in debt, who owns the money? The answer is not one country, not one institution. It is all of us, but not equally. Debt has become money itself. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, markets trade it, and citizens live inside it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But balance depends on belief, and belief does not last forever. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.